You ready? Cecile Richards presented at the University of Chicago School of Law yesterday, and her speech was entitled Reproductive Rights, the Future, which is certainly her right to talk about whatever she pleases. However, we know that facts are really important to law schools. So what is about to ensue are the top things that nobody heard Miss Richards talk about yesterday. This is the facts. This is the rest of the story. The biggest story being the biggest hurdle for Cecile Richards to have to overcome yesterday. How do you spin the massive butt-kicking that Planned Parenthood received in the political campaign that we just had? Let me set this up for you. We are coming off of 8 years of the most pro-abortion president in history. This president supported publicly partial birth abortion. He also refused to support a law that would encourage doctors to save unborn children who are born during an abortion that are viable. He said those situations just don't happen. Well, Mr. President, I have personally talked to and hugged people who have been born alive during abortions, and they survived. They do exist, and they're not hard to find. There are hundreds of them throughout the country. Then, for the first time ever, Planned Parenthood decided to endorse a presidential candidate. They picked presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, who was even more pro-abortion than President Obama, if that is even possible. They were so confident that they'd win the election that they actually tipped their hand to us, and they said they are going to repeal the Hyde Amendment, and they were going to set pro-abortion justices to the Supreme Court. They then spent $38 million to elect pro-abortion politicians. They were probably already picking out their pink-colored furniture for the Oval Office when Americans pulled their trump card and rejected Planned Parenthood. And thus, the Donald became president-elect. If you haven't noticed, Planned Parenthood is having a massive meltdown right now, and if you haven't noticed this, you should probably pay attention, because Trump has appointed one of the most incredibly pro-life cabinets in recent history. Like Trump, hate Trump, don't care, Donald Trump has thus far been a great friend to the pro-life movement. His first pick being vice presidential candidate Mike Pence. His second pick being Attorney General Senator Jeff Sessions. Then he picked Governor Nikki Haley from South Carolina to be the UN ambassador. Governor Nikki Haley just signed a 20-week ban earlier this year in South Carolina. His HHS secretary, Representative Tom Price from Georgia. As Georgia Life Alliance, the premier pro-life organization in that state, said, Representative Tom Price is our gift to the country. When you lose an election this bad, you get up, you go home, you pull out that drawing board, and you start all over. You ask yourself, why do people so soundly reject our policies, our mission, our talking points? You look at data, and then you figure out how to go forward by reflecting on where you came from. But as Cecile Richards said in her talk yesterday at the University of Chicago Law School, they are, quote, doubling down. And earlier this week, Politico reported that NARAL President Elise Hogue is now seriously considering running to be the next chair of the Democratic National Committee. NARAL is one of the biggest, best friends of Planned Parenthood. They're one of the most extreme pro-abortion organizations in the country, and the Democratic National Committee may just be considering her to be their next chair. Since we really can't afford it, I have some completely free advice to politicians. It is time to dump Planned Parenthood. The rest of the nation has dumped Planned Parenthood, as clear in their vote, and the government is about to dump them as well. Their policies are extreme, out of touch, and it costs you the election. If you don't believe me, merely hop on over to Google Trends. Ask yourself, what was the #1 topic that was Googled with Hillary Clinton's name on Election Day? It was abortion. What was the #2 topic Googled with Donald Trump's name on Election Day? It was abortion. So, Planned Parenthood invested $38 million into the Democrats' campaigns, and they got the most pro-life federal government in history. So juicy. So now let's look into just a few of the extreme policies that Planned Parenthood has that are completely out of touch with the character of America and our voters. First, Planned Parenthood is the largest abortion provider in the country. They did 323,999 abortions, according to their latest annual report. That is straight from their numbers. They opposed laws that would protect the disabled from being aborted, meaning that if somebody wanted to abort a child merely because it potentially had Down syndrome, Planned Parenthood says that should be legal. They also oppose any laws that would protect little girls who are aborted merely because their parents wanted a little boy. Planned Parenthood said that too should be legal. They support partial birth abortion, even though that is now illegal in our country. And late-term abortions are something that they think should be free and fair to anyone. Not to mention they ignore basic science. And we must look no further than yesterday's talk by Cecile Richards, in which I'm just going to read it straight for you here. This is straight from the Chicago Maroon. It is the newspaper of the University of Chicago, and it covered Cecile Richards' talk yesterday. And it says, quote, "One question asks Cecile Richards to define the difference between a fetus and a baby." Now, that question apparently prompted gasps from the audience. Gasps, like, oh, how dare somebody ask if that's actually an unborn child? Richards responded, quote, "A fetus hasn't been born yet, and as a mother of 3, I know about this intimately." Well, what Cecile Richards apparently doesn't know is science. And long ago, the science community has settled the question of when does life begin? And that answer is at conception. It's not tough. Planned Parenthood is also under investigation across the country for over 500,000 false, fraudulent, or ineligible Medicaid claims. These have accumulated fines for the abortion giant over $5.5 billion, according to ADF law firm's most recent report released in 2015. With that $5.5 billion in fines, we just may be able to pay off our $19 trillion in debt. Just keep fining Planned Parenthood, and we just may get out of debt. Audits in California of just 2 affiliates have showed $5.2 million in waste, abuse, or fraud. In our own home state of Illinois, Planned Parenthood was forced to pay back $387,000 after the state of Illinois found discrepancies and potential fraud with their Medicaid billing. As if that wasn't enough, the day after the election, Illinois Planned Parenthood posed an extreme, radical, and out-of-touch bill that would force all Illinoisans like you and like me to pay for abortions through all 9 months of pregnancy, for any reason, through Medicaid and for government employees. This means you'd pay for abortions even if it was birth control, even if it was 9 months. You'd get to pay for it. This would give Planned Parenthood more access to Medicaid after we just said they have $5.5 billion in fines that are piling up from this investigation into their fraud, waste, or abuse of the Medicaid system. Illinois could be the next state to offer free abortions to everyone on Medicaid and to government employees. Apparently, that is freedom for women. But here's the serious facts. Planned Parenthood has a serious public image issue. Besides the fact that they kill hundreds of thousands of unborn children, they tell you to shout your abortion like you're proud of it. They have no shame in trying to expand abortion and make it more and more available. They also were caught lying that they did mammograms. Planned Parenthood later admitted they don't do mammograms. They were also, at the end of last year, caught red-handed, selling aborted baby body parts for profit. They have a serious public image problem. They have a serious corporate corruption problem. And yet, politicians continue to align themselves. Maybe it had something to do with $38 million they invested to get their people elected. But where do we go from here? Will defunding Planned Parenthood put them out of business? The answer is no, and that's ridiculous, and Planned Parenthood continues to say it will. Planned Parenthood made $127 million over expenses in 2014. That's $127 million after all their bills were paid. They got $526 million in government funds from yours truly, from the taxpayers. And then Planned Parenthood spent $35 million overseas to expand abortion. Further research shows that Planned Parenthood has enough for a $100 million endowment. So, what happens if Planned Parenthood is defunded? Well, Cecile Richards would say that millions of Americans would lose access to basic health care. She uses that talking point so much that even I have it memorized. But is that actually true? Well, since facts are very important, let's let the facts do the talking. If we look at the state of Illinois, there are 16 Planned Parenthoods in Illinois. Compared to the 670 alternative healthcare clinics in the state, there are 41 healthcare centers for every one Planned Parenthood. And these alternative healthcare centers don't provide abortions. Moreover, that means, according to Planned Parenthood's annual report, Planned Parenthood of Illinois only serves 2.3% of Illinois women of childbearing age. That means over 98% of us women go someplace else for our health care, meaning that a breakup with Planned Parenthood would barely be noticed. 2.3%. And furthermore, not only would it barely be noticed, but polls across the country are showing that women would barely care if Planned Parenthood disappeared. A latest poll that was released over the holiday weekend shows that millennials, our next pro-life generation, support, these are millennials who voted. So voting millennials, 78% of them support a 20-week ban of abortion. That means they don't believe abortion should be legal after the child is 5 months or older, when the unborn child can feel pain of being dismembered by the abortion, and when the risk to a woman's health significantly increase if she has an abortion. Moreover, less than 20% of Americans agree with Planned Parenthood's extreme and out-of-touch position on abortion. The majority of Americans believe that abortion needs restrictions, it needs oversight, and it needs to be extremely rare. If you still have questions about how out of touch and extreme Planned Parenthood is, then let me just finish with a summary of what a local paper said about Cecile Richards' talk yesterday at the University of Chicago. According to DNA Info, reporter Sam Cholke reports that Cecile Richards said Tuesday, the fight for reproductive rights is entering a brutal period under President Donald Trump's administration that could be on par with battles that took place during the civil rights movement and push for women's suffrage. I can't even explain how many times I forget that this is real life. That just yesterday, Planned Parenthood CEO compared the nation rejecting abortion in her extreme positions She compared that to the suffrage, that civil rights movement that the American people went through. The African American community should be outraged by this comparison, and they should understand that Planned Parenthood is nothing more than misleading, out of touch extremists that nobody actually wants to support. So where does that leave the future of Planned Parenthood? Well, voters across our country just dumped Planned Parenthood. They're about to understand what the true meaning of the Boston Tea Party is, because they themselves are about to get dumped by the government as well. And that just leaves the University of Chicago School of Law, who heard Cecile Richards talk yesterday. And I suggest that those who heard her talk dump everything you heard as well. And this is the rest of the story. Visit us on Facebook and our website at IllinoisRightToLife.com.